weeks I've been talking about humanity reaching the point of adolescence. So I thought this week we might do a quick trip through evolution. With this diagram here, it's what we call the Go to YouTube, and I must say it predated YouTube, so we were there first. The Go to YouTube is an ideal diagrammatic way of just looking at the whole of evolution. And as I said last session, it's useful to zoom out in terms of awareness so that you can put things into the bigger picture, the bigger framework. So in order to understand some of the pressures we're going through today, this is just a simple way of looking at it. So if you think, this whole YouTube is the life of our planet, planet Earth. It's this incarnation we're in. Up here at this point in time, the Big Bang. Science now tells us it's something like 14.8 billion years ago. When that happened, the great gases exploded into the universe and gradually coalesced, slowing their vibration down until it became matter. So the minerals were born, and little by little the earth formed and cooled. Gradually the water vapours formed around it, until when we get to this area here, this particular point in time here, which we call the Hyperborean age. That was your Jurassic Park time, when the huge plants and great plant life thrived in this very oxygen-rich and mineral-rich period of time. Gradually, as we go down to the bottom of this period of time, animals appeared, and eventually, by the time we get here to what we call the Lemurian period, mankind started to appear. Well, you might not recognise us as we are now, but way back then, probably very gross, very ape-like, but gradually beginning to form nervous systems and become more like humans. This period in time, there was a great input of energy from other systems. We have the myth, if you like, or the story of Prometheus bringing the fire. That's where that comes from. In the biblical terms, we have the sons of God coming into the daughters of men, bringing the life force, bringing the vitality, bringing the mind, the gift of consciousness. From here on, evolution started to become quite rapid. We moved down into this bottom period of time here, which we call the Atlantean period. Now, there are many myths about Atlantis, the lost land, but if you think about Atlantic Ocean, Atlantis, it's not too mythical, it happened. And down in that period of time, humanity learned to have emotion. Now you might say, why emotion? Because ultimately emotion is our motivators, which is why I meant some sessions back, depression is so difficult. We need our emotions to motivate us to do things. And down there in the bottom of this YouTube, the Atlantean period, we developed our emotions. But then we got pretty greedy and pretty bad with our emotions, and so we brought everything to a halt, but more about that on another session. When Atlantis went down under the waves, we came up as humanity once again. We moved to another continent, we started to grow again, we started to become. And somewhere round about here, our written history starts to evolve. Currently, we're somewhere round about here where that blue piece kicks in. Coming up here, the task was to develop the mind. Here we develop the physical body, here we develop the emotional body, here we have to develop the mind. And just where we are around about here now, we are ideally supposed to be going through adolescence, developing our higher mind, until eventually we move into this period here, which is called the sixth race, or the race of the intuition, race of Tan, where we will live as one humanity. I don't mean we'll all be identical, but we will live in a holistic way, which is why last session I talked a lot about energy and the need in Aquarius to move into an energetic thinking so that we realise we're all part of the one great energy field. When we move from one to another, you can see that line there is a dividing line right across here. When we move from one age to another age, we're moving into something which is a totally different vibratory pattern. And I often say it's very much like going through the Rip at Port Phillip Heads here in Melbourne. It's known worldwide to be an extremely difficult bay to get into. There's a huge differential in the depth of the bay itself and the sea outside it. It creates some very tricky tides, and many a ship has gone adrift in the rip at Port Phillip Heads. That's the sort of energies we're enduring currently. As we move from this type of energy to this type of energy, it's like the change of the tides. And the energy's rushing every which way. The water trying to get out of the bay, the new water trying to come into the bay. Lots of turbulence, lots of dangers, lots of distractions. And humanity's going through that sort of adolescent distractions. It's going through that change before we will come out the other side here into the clearer sailing of living on the higher mental plane or the intuitive plane, when we can start to live as conscious beings with a consciousness of ourselves as spiritual beings having a human experience. And if you think that sounds a bit funny, explore it as a concept, explore it as an idea. You don't have to believe it, just think of it as a possibility. Think of it as a way of making sense of some of the things which don't seem to make much sense currently. If we were spiritual beings having a human experience, it would explain this whole way of the YouTube and all of the experience we're having. If we're not spiritual beings having a human experience, then it makes life pretty pointless. And quite frankly, life is deep and meaningful. And the more you see the meaning and the understanding and the reasons for being, the richer life can be. But perhaps we can talk about that one another time. There's so much to talk about. Please join me again next time.